I think of purity. I think of a mother's love for her newborn child. I think of purity of love with close friends, those intimate close friends that we can't get through the day without. I think of purity of our pastors, our ministers, and our priests throughout the world, who in spite of terrible persecution, continue that purity, that battle, that fight against sin and evil. I think of purity in music, where the performer will do his or her very best, and you sit there and you're touched by the hand of God. I think of purity of Jesus Christ, who in absolute love from God the Father. That's what purity is.
What comes to mind with purity? I think that's hard because for me, the first thing that comes to mind is all the things that I was told not to do, dating-wise, I guess. But to me personally, I think it means more like what my intentions are in my day-to-day life in any way. So if I'm at work and I do something that, I don't know, seems like it might be helpful, but I have ulterior motives that, even if the result is good, if my intentions weren't pure, to me that's shady and not, So I think about purity more in those terms of like a day-to-day, what your inner true self that only you know is thinking and doing. That's what purity is to me.
Well, when you say the word purity, I think about how corrupted everything is in this world. And indeed, Madison Avenue comes to mind because you can't say the word purity without me thinking of an old beer commercial and artesian wells, or Ivory soap, 99 and 44/100% pure, Cincinnatian. You got to think Ivory soap. But when you're talking about purity of the spirit, that's a completely different thing. That's devotion. That's dedication. That's renewing your mind, as Paul taught us in Romans. That's Jesus, the blameless, sinless, perfect man, God. That's what comes to mind.
When I hear the word purity, the thing I think of first is God, because God encompasses all things, everything that's whole and beautiful and clean. And the first verse that popped into my head was the one in the Bible that whatever is true, whatever is pure, and all of the whatevers in that phrase. I don't have the whole thing memorized, but I feel like it spans over everything in life, not just in a relationship, but in terms of being pure, we should think about if this were God, what would be the most purest thing to do to approach this in any situation. I don't think it's not always necessarily a thing, because as humans we're sinners and we're flawed and we're not pure. But in order to be like Jesus, how can we be pure and how can we strive for that purity? And I think that also has a lot to do with forgiveness.